Is it even
I don't
weaponry like explosives?
So this is what I've been talking about when it comes to this concept of like civil war and all that is no, it's mind control. It is absolute mind control. When the easiest way to understand that we are all being mind controlled is first when people okay, let me tell you something. I talk to people about persuasion techniques. I used to do nonprofit fundraising, literally walking up to strangers on the street and being like, I need you to give me $100 right now. And I could make people sign over credit cards. It's really amazing when you consider there's a job where someone standing in the street greets a stranger and then says, give me your credit card information right now and you will get nothing in return. That is the fundraiser's job when they do the street canvassing. What you're doing is you're selling them an idea. So it takes real persuasion and skills. I always tell people, you are not invincible. No one is. Everyone can be controlled and manipulated. And you know what everyone says? Not me. So here's what I do. Whenever I explain to people, I'll say, I can make you say something. And they'll say, no, you can't. I can make you say something and you don't even realize it. I can make you say, yeah, but not me. Want to bet? And they'll be like, what? I won't say that. And then I'll wait a minute or two and then I'll be like, let me explain to you how mind control manipulation works. I'll break down the basics of it and they'll go, yeah, but not me. And I'll go, you owe me $10. I made you say that. It's not so much that I made you, but I knew the sequence of events to get you to say it. Considering that, I always tell people, if mind control, mental manipulation wasn't a thing, Coca-Cola would not be spending billions of dollars on these commercials and billboards and research. You would not have social media companies selling your data to predict your behavior. Mm-hmm. They want to know what makes you do things and why, so they can exploit you for resources. It sounds a bit nefarious. You can break it down to the guy at Coke wants to make $10 more, and he's going to do whatever he can to figure out how to get you to buy another Coke. It's called marketing. But now you have this era where it's been so incredibly refined that big tech companies, they know what you think, they know why you're thinking it, they know what they want you to think, and they are absolutely stripping away the individuality through these networks. What's happening now is, whether intentionally or not, we cannot go outside in big cities for the most part, mostly in blue areas. Can't go to bars, can't go to restaurants, got to wear a mask. Hard to talk when you're wearing a mask. Hard to read someone's lips. A lot of people don't realize this, but when we talk to each other, we are reading lips. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of research showing how you can change the sound, but the lips will still make people hear a different word. When you're in a bar and someone's talking, you will hear the sound and the movements of their mouth and go, I know what they're saying. Take away the ability to see their mouth, and now you're going to be more confused. Very, very difficult to communicate ideas during this lockdown. Then you go on social media and they say, you can't talk about this, or this. You can't say that. Donald Trump's speech, gone, outright. Right Side Broadcasting Network, you're banned for 2 weeks for even showing the president saying it. Ideas are being restricted. This is the greatest weapon we've ever seen. Imagine if during the Civil War, a guy showed up to the Confederate and said, I will win you this war without you firing a single shot. Will you buy this weapon? And they say, what is it? And they would say the printing press or the ability to spread propaganda in a guaranteed manner. What if I told you that the people of the North could only read what we made them read? We could tell them that we could have them vote for insane things that would destroy their own country. We can have them vote for for politicians that would harm them. We can trick them into believing that our soldiers are in different areas. You control what they think, and you need not fire a single shot. You could march into D.C. and never have to fight anyone, and they will smile and celebrate as you do it. That's what's happening with big tech and all this manipulation. Who needs a nuclear bomb? What's that going to do? Scare and harm people? In today's day and age, why bother forcing someone through violence when you can simply tell them to do it and they will?
If you look at the CCP, what they're doing to the Uyghurs, like that's violent. Like, why not be violent if you can? I guess that's up to these psychopaths is what they're thinking. And I've listened to Putin talk about weapons of war and said that all this defense against intercontinental ballistic missiles has become null now. You can fire orbital strike from, and he was very vague about what kind of weapons they have.
Rods from God.
Yeah, he was like, they can't stop it. The United States can't stop our weapons.
You guys know what rods, you know what rods from God are?
I heard about
tungsten.
Hypothetical tungsten rods floating in orbit that they just release and then gravity pulls it down and then boom.
Interesting. I didn't know it was that.
Yep.
I thought it had more to do with satellites, but
well, yeah, satellite would be holding a tungsten rod and just release it, and then it would just fall.
I'm
also concerned with drone dogs. Like we were talking about drone dogs before, like drone weapons. Like nuclear bombs attached to a drone that can fly through a window.
Let's get into that, but I do want to talk a little bit more about Strauss Howe, and then I do want to talk about the police state, the cyber dogs they got in New York. So the Strauss Howe generational theory, when does it start? Was there something before the Revolutionary War, or are they just basically saying, hey, we had a revolution, 80 years later a civil war, 80 years later World War II, probably another thing's going to happen, or was there something we just don't talk about before that?
Yeah, so in the book, they're not really clear. The earliest crisis period that I think they mention is the Glorious Revolution, though they do go back into Roman history, and they say that the term saeculum means a long life because, by the way, anyone who's entering this crisis period wasn't around in the last crisis. So it's usually people are dead. They're not around enough to even know what the pattern means. So history repeating itself, they don't quite get it. But it goes back to the Glorious Revolution, like I said, in England. Before that, they don't really get much into this period. So it seems like they're talking Anglo-Saxon American history, but they do mention, and this is where my understanding breaks down, is other countries going through their own cycles. And they said, if two countries, this was also part of chapter 6, if anyone wants to go in there and check it out, of the Fourth Turning, if two countries reach their crisis period at the same exact time, usually that's when it will definitely end in war, or it's a lot more likely to end in war. If two periods are two major powers specifically are in crisis at the same time.
But it seems like, well, we're facing two potential threats, China, but also civil war. And so if we look internally, we have two tribal factions. You have the populist right, and then you have the establishment. The populist left tends to support the establishment, Well, they'll rag on Joe Biden, but they'll throw their weight behind him. So, you may as well have that. Then you have disaffected, moderate individuals like me. I throw my weight behind Trump, for instance. To a certain degree, voted for the guy, supported him in some endeavors, but I'm fairly critical, just like the populist left is critical of the Democrats, but also throw their weight behind them. It seems like because of Facebook's dominance, Twitter, the internal war being fought right now does include low-tier violence and mass protest and riots, as well as many, these individuals who stormed the Capitol. So there is violence, but it seems like the bigger fight is just the fact that lines of communication are completely controlled right now by the left tribe, which would say to me that by 2028, the populist right tribe will be non-existent. If that's the end of the major climax, if they're talking about insurrection and violence and talk of secession, it sounds like we are entering another civil war period. Texas is already, they got legislation pushed forward that will allow the state to vote for secession. And the Texas GOP is supporting the bill. I support the idea that people should be allowed to vote for things they want. Will they actually be able to pull it off? I don't know. But if Joe Biden who is pushing this very, very heavy gun control stuff, that's the easiest way to look at how Joe Biden's policy demands do not fly at all with red states and some blue states to a certain degree. What I mean by this is the gun control measures he proposes are very good for blue cities. The people who live there, they want them, they like them, they don't want guns, and they live in really close proximity with cops everywhere. So for them, they get it. But Joe Biden wants to have this gun control even in red states nationwide. So what's happening now is the ideological divide between how someone wants to live is they're so diametrically opposed that when Joe Biden is like, I'm going to pass laws that benefit cities, to hell with everybody else, you end up with talk of, right now we have many counties who want us to secede from those states to go to red states. But sooner or later, we're going to see more than just murmurs. We're in 2021. If the climax is supposed to be, or we're in the climax, but if the end is supposed to be 2028, I don't think it's fair to call the climax right now. Because if this is going to keep escalating until it finally goes off the cliff and just stops and then restarts, then the climax is going to be 2027, December 31st.
But I'll tell you, I think September 11th was the inciting incident, and we're in year 20 right now.
I don't know.
Because if you're talking about airplanes, I mean,
the financial crisis was way, way, way worse.
Well,
now we can talk in terms of global damage and societal change. The economic collapse, it sparked Occupy Wall Street. It created years of mass protests. It led to the rise of people like Trump and Bernie Sanders. The reason we get someone like Trump, a lot of the people who supported Trump were Occupy supporters. Now, I get it. 9/11 was a nightmarish tragedy.
It birthed the Patriot Act, which is basically the martial law part of this.
Yeah, but the Patriot Act was, if anything, people didn't care.
I cared.
Sure. Listen, some activists cared, but for the most part, it didn't impact regular people. The mortgage-backed security crisis, the financial crisis, everything that followed brought people to zero, and people were desperate. They were angry. And what did they see? The banks get bailed out. So what happens then is you go to Occupy Wall Street. You had left and right basically screaming, F the establishment. Well, try as they might, and they succeeded. They kept the left and the right divided on this issue. When the young leftists came into Zuccotti Park, they drove away the libertarian and the conservative ideas that were there and dominated with far left populist ideas. You then move forward and you have the rise of Bernie Sanders. The establishment clearly did not want Bernie Sanders to have any power, but they seem to have been taken by surprise at the rise of this left populist movement, and Hillary was furious, and Bernie was rivaling her. She was supposed to win. Bernie wasn't supposed to get close. They cheated. They were submitting, one example is they gave the questions to Hillary so she would know what they were going to ask her and could prepare beforehand. The whole thing seemed to be dirty, and Bernie Sanders supporters believed it. But you also got many people who saw the populist message from Trump. The interesting thing about the 2015-2016 presidential cycle was that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump had many of the same core policies. Bernie Sanders is on record speaking with Vox.com saying open borders is a Koch brothers right-wing proposal. You had people, I met 3 guys in Anaheim at a Trump rally who said they were originally Bernie Sanders supporters. They flipped for Trump when Hillary won. Why? They said Bernie Sanders is a guy whose job has been to be a politician, and he's talking about these free trade agreements. He's talking about union workers. I like these ideas. He's a little too far left for me, but he seems genuine and way better than the establishment. When Hillary Clinton basically took it from Bernie, they said, well, the only other guy talking about these free trade agreements and bringing our jobs back is Trump. So they flipped for Trump. 2 different elements of the populist revolt, which started primarily because of the economic collapse and how it destroyed the lives of many people. Now you have 2 things to consider. For one, boomers' lives were destroyed and they got angry. So they said Bernie or Trump. You then had millennials who are now entering a job market competing with boomers for entry-level jobs. Now you have Gen Z who literally entered the market after that where there were no jobs. And so they're all basically becoming socialists. Or I should say they're very socialistic, albeit there is a slight push towards some conservatism. But it's no surprise that you see so many socialist youth when they're like, by the time I was old enough to get a job, what scraps were left were taken up by millennials. The millennials are like, I did everything I was told to. And then when I tried to get a job, all I could get was entry-level garbage. I could barely pay off my student loans. The system isn't working. When you take a look at the M1 money stock, what do you see? Up until 2008, there's a slow and steady increase. At 2008, it sharply increases. And then here in 2021, in 2020, it shoots straight up. Now, they say it's because they changed the reporting metric for it. However, before they changed the reporting metric, the spike had already begun. So if anything, it seems like they changed the reporting metric because they needed to mask it to some capacity. So in my view, 2008 was this major economic catalyst, which sparked this populist uprising, which leads to Donald Trump, which leads to now claims of Democrats saying insurrection, the culture war and the clashes and everything around it are all merging into one. And it's coming to a point where we just had federal charges for Antifa dropped in Portland, yet they're going after some befuddled granny who walked into the Capitol building when the cops opened the door for her. Republicans and people on the tribal right can see that there's a double standard and they're being treated like second-class citizens. That Antifa for over a year can burn down entire cities, and the vice president, now the vice president, literally can fundraise on their behalf, and it is accepted. But you get a video of the cops opening the door at the Capitol and saying, well, I don't agree with it, but I agree with your right to protest, and welcoming them all in. And these people walk in smiling, taking selfies, respecting the velvet ropes, smiling and taking pictures with cops. And now these people are facing serious charges and they're being called insurrectionists and lawyers won't even represent them. Now we're seeing the wave of censorship that's escalating. The conflict has only gotten worse. Both sides are ready to just slam into each other. And I think it's going to get bad.
I think the 2008 thing makes a little bit more sense, mainly because there's something about the winter crisis period that they mentioned. So like, instead of just looking at the external, like what are the events and things like that, take a look at people's behavior, because they do say sparks, inciting events, if it happens in a different turning, like in the spring or the summer or the fall, we behave differently. And so in 2001, you didn't see as many people amassing. So they say in a high period, which is right after a crisis, the number one thing that sparks create is synergy. It's actually synergy. In an awakening, which you go back and look at the hippie generation, it's argument. That's the number one thing sparks do. And then during an unraveling, it's anxiety. But during a winter period, it's action. And you see a lot more action come the 2008, like, from that entering to the Occupy, and then everything from there, people, and even just the ease of social media, getting together, bringing your ideas together. It seems like people are a lot more action oriented. And they do say that, the new presidents that come in during this period will have a, no BS, like straight to the point, let's get down to business kind of like action orientation.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.